So, welcome back to our 5 levels of consciousness discussion. Today we're going to be talking about level 4.
Level 4 is context, and it's the most complex and I think the most fascinating.
And it's a very difficult one to understand, partly because, remember, as you go further, you are less aware. And so you're going to be a lot less aware of your context, which is partly why it's hard to really understand the concept of
In the introduction, you said that context is the first level that reaches the level of being unavailable to your conscious awareness on a regular
Right.
basis. Like you have to bring it into awareness. You're not just aware of it.
Right, and you're not going to be. And there's all kinds of wonderful examples of this level in just the way that we communicate with each other, because we are highly affected by it.
We make so many assumptions about the world based on it. Yeah.
Because our context really is our reality. It's how we experience the world and how we view ourselves in relation to the world around us. And so it's all of that. And so it's just this big, huge thing. Now in our first lecture, we did talk about how God's reality is the truth, or God's context is the truth, and ours is our reality. And I wanted to clarify something about that, and that is our goal is to align ourselves with God. So in other words, eventually we want our context to be the truth also. And we can get there eventually.
And there's probably are already places where our context touches on the truth, where it brushes again, where it overlaps with
Right.
truth.
But
it's very hard for us to distinguish those, the actual true parts of our context, from the parts that we just believe.
Right. Okay, so a couple of things about context that are just really key to understand. There's so much here. Well, one is, and I don't know what order we want to go in, so I'm just going to go. One is that any of your real severe psychological disorders, they're really at this level that the disorder is placed. Because
Yeah, we touched on that in the lesson on feelings, because when you started talking about how there's only uncomfortable feelings and not bad feelings,
right,
and that it's okay to be sad, I immediately leapt in my mind to, but persistent uncomfortable emotions
right, but
are a problem that needs to be solved.
Right, except for that. So you only have persistent uncomfortable emotions if you have a malfunctioning context.
Yeah. So that's why you in that discussion, you're like, that's a context issue.
Right.
So we tabled it. I think
Right.
that's why you're ready to come
And
right back to it.
Yeah, I do. I want to make it clear that psychological disorders, these mental health issues are real, but they're real at the context level. And we might feel the emotions associated with them, but it's not a disorder of the emotion.
Yeah. And sometimes people might express to somebody who is experiencing one of these disorders their feeling or context of that disorder being unreal, not existing, some sort of version of just snap out of it.
Mm-hmm.
That is so hurtful and unhelpful, and that's because of the difference in context. But
Right.
you are validating the existence of these disorders. You're not saying
Sure.
that they don't exist or that you should just get over them.
No, and you can't just get over them because changing a context is a very difficult thing. So let's go back and talk just really quickly about.
Oh, that's right. We haven't talked about the timeline for change in the different.
Oh, I was gonna
areas.
do that at the end.
Okay, not at this point.
Well, we can, but what I wanted to go back first is touch on the two things that we've been touching on each of these levels is the level of control and the level of share, how it's shared, right?
Yes, of course.
And then how do you change it? So the level of control that you have of your context is just like your emotions. You don't have any control. There's no control, direct control over your context. This is your experience. This is your reality. You don't just, it's not like you can just, I don't want to have that one. You know, so that's the first thing. The second thing.
So for instance, if you feel like you have a context that Christmas time, the whole family should get together.
Mm-hmm.
And then your children grow up and get married and they want to not come home for Christmas. You can't just make yourself not think that it's important for them to come home for Christmas.
Right. And speaking of that, the other thing that's really interesting about this when you're talking about that is more often than not, it is when we're offended, when somebody offends us, it's because somebody has challenged one of our contexts. So if my daughter says, I don't think I'm going to come home for Christmas, and I'm thinking
And
it's
your context
really
is?
important. Yeah, my context is families should be together at Christmas time. Well, she now has just challenged that context. And that is likely to offend me. I'm going to be hurt.
Yeah. So a huge amount of interpersonal conflict comes from these places where contexts clash with each other.
Right, right. So those are some important things about context. The other thing about context is that this is where context is a little bit different from the previous levels, and that is context can sometimes be shared through our actions inadvertently. Like we say and do things that make other people recognize a context that we may not even recognize ourselves. So we are less aware oftentimes of our context than the people around us are, because inadvertently through our actions we're divulging context. And so
Can you give an example of that?
oh my goodness, let me think about it. I'd have to think about that for a minute.
So maybe a family member repetitively says some negative things about a group of people, and you start thinking, boy, this person has a context that this group of a negative context about this group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that person might say, oh no, I
Oh.
I don't have bad feelings about this group for whatever
Right.
reason.
But-
I don't dislike them, but you've heard them say repetitively over time
Right.
enough negative things that you are starting to create this picture of them that says, you know, their context towards this group is negative.
Yeah, no, that's a good example. Another example is just the age-old story of the roast.
Oh yes, the man who's upset that his wife always cuts the ends off the roast, and then she says she does it because her mother did it, and the mother says that she did it because the grandmother did it, and the husband goes and says to the grandmother, why do you waste the ends
Why
of your
did you
roast?
teach
And
you-
she says, my roasting pan is too small.
Yeah, and so the mother and the grandmother have the context of this is how a roast is cooked.
Yeah, the daughter and the mother
Right.
and the
And then
grandmother
the grandmother
doesn't have that
doesn't-
context. She just did it for practical purposes.
Right, but these in the story, the husband and the wife, this actually is kind of becoming a conflict, because he's being frustrated with it, and she's being frustrated that he won't. You know, she knows how to cook a roast. You know, that's her context. This is the way you cook a roast, and he's thinking, what is going on here? Why are we wasting good meat? And you come to find out that the context was built over time because her mother watched her grandmother cook, and so just followed without asking, why are we doing it this way? But just followed because that's how you cook a roast, right? So that's just a way that other people are observing and they're seeing this context and they're like, and he was frustrated by the context.
Yeah. And the reason the story is valuable in this particular setting is that we have all created many, many, many hundreds, if not thousands, of contextual ideas that we don't even know where they come from.
Right.
We are unaware of having created them, of the source of them. They just feel like the way things are.
And some people start to observe and notice them. And the wife in this story, she didn't pay attention to what she was doing. She just, in the sense that she didn't think, how do I cook a roast? Okay, the way to cook a roast is this. She just cooked it.
Yeah. I had a thought prompted by the fact that we're sitting in front of bookshelves. I had a very silly context challenged recently when I was online and somebody said, all your guys' pictures of bookshelves, that the books are all uneven, like mine are. It drives me crazy. Why don't you line up the books so they're all even? And they kind of like this, like you bring them all out so they're all flush with each other, right? And when this person said that, I had never thought that that is a possibility of a way to put books on your bookshelf, to put them all flush rather than pushing them to the back of the shelf. But there was all of a sudden this huge debate between the people who are the push to the back of the shelfers, who are convinced that's the right way to put books on shelves, and the people who were the bring them flush, who were convinced that that was the only correct way to put books on shelves. And it was something I had never even had any inkling was a possibility. It sounds so silly, like why I wouldn't even think that it's a possibility to line your books up flush, but it just never occurred to me.
Yeah. So that's what our context is. It's how we experience the world. And when somebody challenges,
push my books back the correct way to the back of the shelf.
And when somebody when somebody challenges that context, it creates a cognitive dissonance between yourself and the person challenging.
And what often happens, where something that maybe you just do and you don't even think about right or wrong, all of a sudden, when the context is challenged, there's a right version and a wrong version.
Mm-hmm. And you become
they're
very
in conflict.
Oftentimes you
with each
become
other.
defensive.
Oh, yeah.
About your way of doing things, even though either way is probably just fine. But because you were challenged, there's this need to defend yourself. There isn't actually a need, but you feel a need to defend yourself, and so you go into this defensive mode, and it can create all kinds of relationship problems.
So you'd say probably the most problems of people who are coming to see you that you're trying to resolve, would you say the greatest number are contextual issues?
Well, they're all contextual issues, but because the context is influenced so much by thoughts and feelings and actions, then
you might focus on a different part of that.
Right, they're all involved, and we might try focusing on overcoming thinking patterns that are validating a negative context. We might try overcoming feelings that are validating a negative context, right? So we want to get rid of the negative context, and sometimes you have to do that gradually going down. And usually you would start, you're going to use actions to overcome the thoughts that validate the context. Then you're going to move to feelings, and then you're going to move to the overall context itself. Because if you try to go up, it's much less effective. So you want to do that. But so the thing is, and so now we're talking about changing a context, right? And what kinds of contexts do we want to change? And we want to change any context that doesn't align with God's will, is really what we want to do.
Or with the truth.
Or with the truth, because that's what we're trying. We're trying to get our reality to be the truth.
But if you're made aware of the incorrectness of a context, maybe you're made aware that you have a dozen incorrect contexts. You can't focus on changing all of those at once, because contextual change is incredibly um, it requires an incredible amount of energy. It's a
And
real
time. And time.
It's a huge resource drain.
Right. So, let's just really quickly talk about time frame. So, and I'm going to just jump back really quickly to thoughts and feelings, just to put this in perspective. To change a thought takes anywhere from 2.5 to 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Like an unwanted thought, 2.5 to 5 minutes. Whether you're distracting the thought or whether you're doing some kind of cognitive dissonance, that's how long it usually takes.
Which, fortunately, is the length of most songs. So
Right.
when we talked about how songs are
Using a
really
hymn.
useful, part of the reason is because they just fit into that slot, that time slot, so nicely.
Right. The feelings are going to take anywhere from about a half of an hour to 6 hours to change. If it's taking longer than 6 hours to change a feeling, then you're probably actually dealing with a context and not a feeling. If you're actively trying to change it and it's not working, and then you want to look at it and see, what is there something deeper in my context that's
That's making me feel this way.
right. So half hour to 30 to a half hour to 6 hours to change a feeling, and then to change a context. Most contexts are going to take you 6 months to 2 years. So you can see
It's a huge leap up from a couple minutes, a few hours. You sort of think there ought to be something in there that's like a few days, a few weeks.
Yeah,
Like we've made a big jump.
There's not. Now you can say some routines, and routines are context. So there are some routines that you can change in
A few
about
weeks.
3 weeks. 3 weeks is really about the minimum that you need to be able to actually make a full change.
So when you hear people talk about how a habit can be formed in 21 days, this is where we're coming from. Where that information is coming from. The research that suggests that the minimum time to establish a new habit, a new routine, and this is only if it's a very simple habit that fits well into your life, is 21 days.
Right, and that's a very
So
minimum.
don't think you can change any bad habit in 21 days, because it's not going to happen.
No, most contextual things are going to take 6 months to 2 years to make a full change where you become somebody different than you were. And you have to think about this. Your context, and remember, this is your reality. And so in order to change a reality, it takes a while. But once that reality is changed, the really neat thing is that it also has changed your feelings and your thoughts, and you're of course changing your actions, because that's what you're using. And here's the thing: to change a context, you have to use multiple repetitive actions. It can't. So changing a feeling, changing a thought, a single action.
You can say, here's a
can do
tool
it.
for doing that thing. There's
Right.
not one tool for
No,
context
for
change.
context change, it's good.
Well, I mean, the change wheel.
Well,
but
there is
that's
the
not-
change wheel, but and we'll do a lesson on that as well. But
Yeah, there's going to be a whole class on the change wheel.
but the thing that you have to recognize is that it takes repetitive actions, multiple repetitive actions over a long period of time to change a context.
So 6 months. I am just about to hit the 6-month mark on a change that I made back in February. In February, at the beginning of Lent, I had decided that I wanted to make some healthy changes for Lent. And I looked at what I had been doing activity-wise in the past year, and I have on my phone a health app that records my steps. A lot of people use a tool like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a step count goal. My daily step count goal was 8,000 steps a day. And when I looked at that information on my phone, I saw that I had made that goal 1 time in the last week. I had made it 3 times in the last month. And I had made it 20 times in the last year. so less than twice a month on average for the last year. And I really wanted to change that. I thought this is I had set the goal based on some research on what was kind of a base level for being a healthy, active person. And I really did want to have that goal. And so what I ended up doing was setting my goal step count down to what my actual current average of steps were. And say, this is what I am doing now. And then I improved it by 1% each day or I increased it by 1% until I reached back to that 8,000 step count goal. That was my original goal. And then I kept it at that. And doing that, I have not missed hitting my step count one day in what will be 6 months in 3 days.
Yeah.
So at some point, that goal change is going to become a context change from being a person who was fairly sedentary to being a person who is relatively active and is enjoying the health benefits of that increased overall activity level.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that I don't. There's so context is something that also, when you're trying to understand somebody else, why are they doing the things they're doing? If you can kind of get some kind of idea about their context, it sure helps you to understand them so much better.
Oh, can I tell you one more thing about context shift myself? This lesson's
Yeah.
just going to be all about my own personal experiences. I have had a context shift over the chore of doing the laundry. That when we were first married, the laundry was my least favorite chore.
Mm-hmm.
And I now have the laundry as my favorite chore. And that is a long story that we don't have time to, but it involved lots of different steps over the course of 10 or 15 years to move from having this be my idea that I hate doing the laundry to I look forward to doing the laundry.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a contextual shift.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. So with context, again, I think it's important to remember that sometimes other people see and recognize our context better than we do. And it's also important to I think it's important to try to understand your context, to pull things to your awareness.
It's actually fun. It's enjoyable to learn to know yourself better. That's why all of these BuzzFeed quizzes of what pizza flavor are you, or different sorts of personality analysis, all kinds of things are so popular with people because people want to understand their way of looking at the world. And a lot of what we call personality really is just an effect of your particular context. Your context is so complicated. It's like the DNA of your personality.
And it's interesting, I frequently do little psychological analyses with people, just for fun, not like for work, but just people come over for dinner or something.
And you do some kind of analysis quiz.
Yeah, we do a little analysis quiz, and it's interesting how much people enjoy it, and how often people will tell me things like, how could you possibly know that? I'll ask them a few questions about, your favorite color, your favorite animal, and your, things like that. And then I can tell them things about themselves, and they get really shocked. And, or I do it with music too. I really enjoy having people bring in a theme song, and then I tell them I say, okay, so let me listen to your song. I listen to their song, and then I tell them things about themselves that they're like, how did you get that out of that song? How could you know this about me from that song that I chose?
And it's a fun parlor trick, but all you're doing is identifying context.
Right. I'm being able to observe them, their behaviors and actions, their choice of song, their choice of favorite animal, favorite color, and being able to deduce from that some of their realities. And it's really, so you want to, before you do it with other people, you want to do it with yourself. You want to be able to find out some things about yourself.
We're just leading into homework time, so I'm hoping that our homework is going to be about discovering our own context.
Well, it is. It is about discovering, but how? How do you discover your own context?
Since it's so close to you that you can't see it, it's like not being able to see the forest for the trees.
Mm-hmm.
How do you?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to tell you something that's really interesting. People who have favorites are generally more aware of their own context than people who don't.
So if you say to somebody, what's your favorite color? And they act like, oh, I never think about what my favorite color is. That's not,
That's a sign
that's a sign of a lack of a certain sort of contextual awareness.
Yeah, it's a sign of a lack of awareness. If you say, what's your favorite color? And they say, oh, red. Well, there's an awareness there that they know something about themselves. And if you say, why? Oh, why red? And they can give you the reasons right off the bat. Again, it shows a sense of awareness. Whereas if they're like, I don't know, it's like, okay, that shows that they're not as aware of themselves as somebody who would be able to do that. So, having said that, that's what your assignment is. I want you, when you're doing the assignment, I want you to list out 10 favorites. And I don't care what they are. You can do color, you can do a favorite song, you can do a favorite, I don't care what your favorite thing is, favorite food, list 10 favorites. And then I want you to write down 3 reasons that is your favorite. You could probably do 5 favorites if you're feeling like 10 is too much.
No. You need at least 10 favorite things. That's a minimum. You should have many, many favorites.
So 10 favorites and 3 reasons why it's your favorite in each of those categories.
I really like that assignment. I'm going to go do that one myself. Because it's fun to find out things about yourself.
It is fun to find out things about yourself.
All right, we'll be coming back for the last lesson, the conclusion, very soon.